Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine stepping backward through time, past the rise and fall of civilizations, past the birth of agriculture, past the discovery of fire itself. Keep going. Further back than you've ever dared to imagine. Now open them. You're standing in Africa, 2.7 million years ago. But this isn't the Africa you know. Where the Sahara Desert stretches endlessly today, ancient rivers carve through emerald landscapes. Massive lakes shimmer where now only dust devils dance. The air itself feels different here, thicker, wilder, pregnant with possibility and danger in equal measure. This is Earth during the Pliocene epoch, a world caught between what was and what could become. The Great Rift Valley spreads before you like a prehistoric amphitheater, its walls rising toward clouded skies. Volcanic peaks puncture the horizon, occasionally belching steam and ash into the atmosphere. The ground beneath your feet pulses with tectonic energy. This land is literally tearing itself apart, creating the geological crucible where humanity will be born. But you're not alone in this ancient theater. Listen, do you hear that? The soft grunting, the rustle of movement through tall grass? Something is stirring in the acacia grove ahead. Something that walks upright, but moves with an alien grace our modern eyes have never witnessed. Meet your ancestors. Not the noble, tool-wielding early humans you might imagine, but something far more mysterious. They emerge from the morning shadows like ghosts made flesh, a small band of creatures that science calls Australopithecus, the southern ape. But that clinical name doesn't capture what you're seeing. They stand barely 4 feet tall, these forgotten pioneers. Their bodies tell a story of evolutionary compromise, powerful, almost gorilla-like arms attached to increasingly human-like torsos. Their hands are the real revelation. Long, dexterous fingers that could grip, manipulate, create. Hands that hold the future, even if their owners don't know it yet. Their faces peer out from beneath heavy brow ridges, eyes that burn with an intelligence that's unmistakably familiar. Not human, not quite, but something more than animal. Something caught beautifully, tragically, between two worlds. The family group moves with practiced silence through the dawn landscape. A mother carries her infant, its tiny fingers clutched in her coarse hair. Juveniles stay close, learning through observation and mimicry. Adult males scan the environment with hypervigilant eyes, reading a landscape filled with both promise and peril. Because this paradise comes with a terrible price. Every shadow could hide death. Saber-toothed cats the size of modern lions prowl these woodlands. Their massive canine teeth evolved specifically for puncturing thick hides and crushing vertebrae. Hyenas twice the size of their modern descendants hunt in coordinated packs, their bone-crushing jaws capable of snapping femurs like twigs. In the rivers that will one day be dust, crocodiles longer than school buses lurk beneath deceptively peaceful surfaces. These are not the crocodiles you know. These are Crocodylus anthropophagus, the man-eating crocodile, perfectly named for a prey species that doesn't even exist yet. And everywhere, the pressure of competition. Early elephants strip bark from trees with devastating efficiency. Massive ground sloths claim the best fruit trees. Troops of larger, more aggressive baboons defend water sources with savage territorial displays. But perhaps the most dangerous predator of all is hunger itself. Watch our small family as they begin their daily ritual of survival. The sun climbs higher, and with it, the urgency in their movements intensifies. Because here's the brutal arithmetic of Pliocene existence. They need roughly 2,000 calories per day to survive. Their growing brains demand even more fuel than their ape cousins require. And they have no tools to help them get it. No sharpened sticks to dig tubers. No stone blades to process tough plant fibers. No weapons to defend themselves or hunt with. Just those remarkable hands, increasingly sophisticated brains, and an environment that's both abundant and almost impossibly dangerous to access. This is the paradox that will haunt our ancestors for hundreds of thousands of years. They're surrounded by food, nuts encased in shells too hard for teeth to crack, tubers buried too deep for fingers to reach, protein-rich bone marrow locked inside bones too thick to break. It's like being locked in a grocery store where everything is sealed in containers you cannot open. The morning air carries scents our modern noses could never interpret. The sweet rot of fallen fruit, the mineral tang of exposed lake beds, the musky warnings left by territorial predators. But these ancestral noses read this chemical library like we read road signs. That scent means ripe figs 2 kilometers south. This one signals fresh water beyond the ridge. That trace of predator musk says, change direction now. Their world operates on schedules we've forgotten. Everything revolves around the eternal rhythm of wet season and dry season, abundance and scarcity, life and death. During the rains, fruits swell on branches and tubers grow fat underground. But these periods of plenty are brief, precious, and fiercely contested. During the dry months, and they can stretch for 6 months or more, the landscape transforms into something from a nightmare. Trees shed their leaves, exposing hiding places to predators. Water sources shrink to muddy pools contested by desperate animals of every species. The abundant plant foods of the wet season become memories, forcing our ancestors into increasingly dangerous gambles for survival. But here's what's truly remarkable about this scene unfolding before us. These beings, caught between worlds, are about to accomplish something that no species in Earth's history had ever achieved. They're going to feed brains that are growing larger each generation, without the tools that brain evolution should have already provided. It's an impossible biological paradox. Big brains need lots of energy. Energy requires efficient food processing. Efficient food processing demands sophisticated tools. But the tools won't be invented for hundreds of thousands of years. So how did they do it? How did they solve the equation that modern nutritionists still struggle with? How to fuel a brain that consumes 20% of the body's total energy on a diet that consists primarily of plants and whatever scraps they could scavenge? The answer lies in watching them move through this ancient landscape. Notice how they spread out but never lose visual contact. See how their hands constantly test, probe, evaluate everything they encounter. Watch the subtle communication, grunts that mean food here, gentle touches that say danger that way, postures that communicate everything from I'm hungry to follow me. They're not just surviving in this landscape. They're reading it, learning it, becoming part of its very ecosystem in ways we're only beginning to understand. This small family represents something unprecedented in the history of life on Earth. They are the first creatures to depend not on instinct alone, not on genetic programming, but on accumulated knowledge. Knowledge that must be learned, practiced, shared, and passed down through generations. They are the first beings who must teach their young how to survive. As the sun climbs toward its zenith, our family begins to scatter across the landscape in a carefully choreographed dance of survival. Each individual knows their role, their territory, their responsibilities to the group. The adults will spend the next 8 hours foraging, processing, and consuming enough plant matter to fuel bodies and brains that demand more energy than evolution has quite figured out how to provide efficiently. But they'll do it. Somehow, miraculously, they'll meet the challenge that each sunrise presents. They'll find those 2,000 calories hidden in a landscape that guards its secrets jealously. They'll dodge predators, solve botanical puzzles, and share their discoveries with the next generation. And in doing so, they'll take the first tentative steps toward becoming us. This is where your story begins. Not with the first tool, not with the discovery of fire, not with the first word spoken into the prehistoric dawn. It begins here, with empty hands and growing minds, in a world that demanded the impossible. And somehow they achieved it. But that's a mystery we're only beginning to unravel. The full story of how these remarkable beings fed their evolving brains without the tools their intelligence should have already created. That story is written in stone, in fossilized bones, and in the very landscape that witnessed their impossible success. The question that will haunt the rest of our journey together is this: If they could do the impossible with nothing but their wits and their hands, what does that say about the true nature of human ingenuity? The sun continues its ancient arc across the African sky, and our ancestors continue their eternal dance of survival. But now you know you're watching something unprecedented, something that has never happened before and will never happen again. You're witnessing the birth of human intelligence itself. The first lesson of survival is this: desperation breeds genius. It's been 3 hours since sunrise, and our small family of Australopithecus has already walked 5 kilometers across the ancient landscape. Their stomachs ache with the familiar gnaw of morning hunger, but their movements are purposeful, calculated. They're not wandering aimlessly, they're executing a survival strategy honed over countless generations. Watch closely as the matriarch of the group stops beside what appears to be an unremarkable patch of ground. To our eyes, it's just dirt and scattered grass. But she sees something else entirely. Her weathered fingers probe the earth, reading subtle signs: a particular pattern of cracked soil, the angle of dying vegetation, the faint depression that signals treasure buried below. She begins to dig. What happens next is nothing short of miraculous. Using only her fingernails and teeth, tools shaped by millions of years of evolution, she excavates a tuber the size of a modern potato. But this isn't just any root, it's packed with carbohydrates that will fuel her family's survival for hours. How did she know it was there? The answer reveals the first great revolution in human intelligence. Our ancestors had become walking botanical libraries. They didn't just see plants, they read them like we read books. The subtle browning of leaves that indicated underground tubers were ready for harvest. The specific way morning dew gathered on certain grass species that revealed edible seeds hidden beneath. The particular sound made by wind through branches that meant fruit was approaching perfect ripeness. Modern hunter-gatherer societies possess knowledge of 200 to 300 plant species in their territories. But these ancient ancestors? Archaeological evidence suggests they knew even more. They had to. Their survival depended on a botanical expertise that would shame most university-trained botanists today. Picture this: every plant in their environment came with a detailed mental file. Nutritional content, seasonal availability, processing requirements, potential toxicity levels. Some plants were safe when young but poisonous when mature. Others required specific preparation to neutralize natural toxins. Still others were only edible during certain moon phases when chemical compositions shifted. This wasn't instinct, this was science. Empirical observation passed down through generations, tested and refined through trial and error. The kind of errors that could kill you if you got them wrong. But plants, no matter how expertly harvested, presented a fundamental problem. They're low in calories and difficult to digest. Our ancestors needed to spend 6 to 8 hours every single day just chewing and processing enough vegetation to meet their basic energy requirements. Imagine dedicating a full workday, every day, just to the physical act of eating. Your jaw muscles aching from constant grinding. Your digestive system working overtime to extract nutrients from tough, fibrous materials. And all the while, predators hunting you, competitors challenging you, and the constant pressure to keep moving, keep searching, keep surviving. The mathematics of this existence were brutal and unforgiving. Water presented its own deadly puzzle. Unlike modern humans, who can survive for days without hydration, our ancestors lived in a constant state of thirst. Their plant-heavy diet required enormous amounts of water for digestion. Their active lifestyle in the African heat demanded even more. But every water source was a potential death trap. Follow our family as they approach the ancient shoreline of Lake Turkana, its waters stretching toward a horizon that shimmers with heat and possibility. The adults approach cautiously, scanning the reed beds where massive crocodiles lie in wait. Their eyes constantly shift between the life-giving water and the shadows that could hide sudden death. Watch how they've learned to read the water itself. Gentle ripples mean fish activity, potential food. But the wrong kind of ripples, the subtle V-shaped wake cutting through otherwise still water, means something far more dangerous is approaching. They've developed techniques that would seem ingenious even by modern standards. Large leaves become natural containers, allowing them to carry water away from dangerous shores. They've learned to dig shallow wells at the edges of dried-up water holes, accessing groundwater that's often cleaner than surface sources. But perhaps most remarkably, they've mastered the art of reading landscapes for hidden water sources. The particular shade of green that indicates underground springs. The way certain trees cluster that reveals seasonal water flows. The behavior of animals that leads them to sources they never would have found on their own. And then there was the protein problem, the puzzle that modern nutritionists still struggle to understand. Growing brains require amino acids. Lots of them. But how do you get sufficient protein when you can't hunt large game, can't fish effectively, and don't yet possess the tools needed to access most animal-based nutrition? The answer, written in the archaeological record, is both brilliant and disturbing. Our ancestors became masters of opportunity. They learned to read the behavioral patterns of large predators with scientific precision. When lions made a kill, there was a window, sometimes only minutes long, between the initial feeding and the arrival of scavenging hyenas. During that brief interval, quick-thinking hominins could dash in and tear away strips of meat, often at tremendous personal risk. But they went further than simple scavenging. They became forensic specialists in carcass analysis. They could tell from bone breakage patterns whether a predator had consumed the nutrient-rich marrow inside long bones. If not, they faced the maddening challenge of accessing that protein without tools. Here's where ingenuity born from desperation becomes visible in the archaeological record. Rocks became hammers. Other rocks became anvils. The art of precision stone striking was learned not to make tools, but simply to crack open bones for their life-sustaining contents. Every successful marrow extraction was a small miracle. Too little force and the bone remained intact. Too much force and the precious marrow was destroyed or contaminated with bone fragments. The technique required precise calibration of angle, impact force, and timing. But protein came from sources that would surprise you. Our ancestors became entomologists by necessity. They could identify the seasonal emergence of termite swarms with calendar-like precision. They knew which rotting logs contained the fattest beetle larvae. They understood the breeding cycles of weaver birds well enough to raid nests for eggs at the optimal nutritional moment. This wasn't random foraging. This was systematic exploitation of every possible protein source in their environment. Watch as one of the juveniles in our group approaches a fallen tree trunk, his hands moving with practiced efficiency across the bark surface. He's reading the subtle signs that indicate insect activity below. The particular pattern of holes that means beetle larvae. The faint sound of movement that reveals termite galleries. His fingers work like surgical instruments, peeling away bark layers with incredible delicacy. One wrong move, and he'll destroy what he's seeking. Too much force, and he'll alert the insects to his presence, causing them to retreat deeper into tea. When he finally extracts a fat, protein-rich grub, he doesn't consume it immediately. Instead, he calls softly to the others, sharing his discovery. This act of communication, of knowledge transfer, represents something unprecedented in evolutionary history. He's teaching, not through instinct or genetic programming, but through conscious demonstration of technique. The younger members of the group cluster around, watching, learning, practicing. Knowledge that took years to acquire is being transmitted in moments. This is the birth of human culture itself. But the most remarkable innovation of these ancient ancestors wasn't technical, it was social. They had learned something that no other species on Earth had mastered, the art of reciprocal sharing. When the plant specialist found tubers, she shared with the group. When the insect expert located protein sources, he distributed the bounty. When the water finder discovered new sources, the knowledge belonged to everyone. This wasn't altruism, this was survival strategy. By pooling their specialized knowledge and distributing risks across the group, they created a safety net that no individual could achieve alone. The afternoon heat builds, and our family faces the daily crucible that will test every adaptation they've developed. The temperature soars past 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Predators seek shade, but our ancestors cannot afford to rest. Their metabolic requirements demand constant foraging, constant vigilance, constant movement. They've learned to read their own bodies with scientific precision. The subtle signs of dehydration before it becomes dangerous. The specific type of hunger that indicates protein deficiency versus carbohydrate depletion. The early warning symptoms of heat exhaustion that could quickly become fatal. Their survival depends on staying just ahead of physiological collapse every single day without exception. As shadows begin to lengthen, something changes in their behavior. The leisurely morning foraging gives way to more urgent activity. They're preparing for the nightly challenge that will test everything they've learned about survival in a world that wants them dead. Because when the sun sets over ancient Africa, a different kind of hunger awakens. Predators that have spent the hot afternoon resting in whatever shade they could find begin to stir. Night hunters emerge from hidden dens. The landscape transforms from a challenging food source into an active hunting ground. And our small family of early humans, despite all their innovations, despite all their hard-won knowledge, despite all their remarkable adaptations, face the same fundamental reality their ancestors faced for millions of years. They remain prey, but they're no longer helpless prey. They've learned to turn their greatest weakness, their lack of natural weapons, into their greatest strength. They've become the most knowledgeable, most adaptable, most cooperative creatures their world has ever seen. The question that haunts the gathering darkness is whether knowledge and cooperation will be enough to survive what's coming next. Because the real test of their revolutionary survival strategies isn't the daily challenge of finding food and water. It's what happens when their entire world begins to collapse around them. Sometimes, the greatest revolutions happen in the spaces between heartbeats. In moments so subtle, so seemingly insignificant, that their true magnitude only becomes clear when viewed across the vast arc of time. We're about to witness one of those moments. The sky above ancient Africa has turned an ominous shade of copper. It's not sunset, it's midday, but the sun struggles to penetrate a growing veil of volcanic ash. Somewhere to the east, along the Great Rift Valley, the Earth itself is convulsing. Massive eruptions are reshaping the landscape, sending plumes of debris high into the atmosphere. Our small family of Australopithecus huddles together, their eyes watering from the acrid air. They've never experienced anything like this. The volcanic winter that's beginning will last for months, fundamentally altering their world and testing every survival strategy they've developed. But here's what's remarkable about this moment of crisis. They don't panic. Instead, they adapt. Watch as the matriarch leads her family away from their traditional foraging grounds, now choked with ash and dying vegetation. She's making decisions based on knowledge accumulated over decades, knowledge about distant water sources, alternative food plants, safe travel routes through predator territories. She's thinking multiple moves ahead, like a chess master planning strategy. But the pieces on her board are life and death, and the stakes couldn't be higher. This crisis will become their greatest teacher. As familiar food sources disappear under layers of volcanic debris, they're forced to experiment, to push the boundaries of what they thought possible. Plants they'd previously ignored suddenly become crucial to survival. Techniques they'd used occasionally become daily necessities. Innovation explodes across every aspect of their existence. They learn to process bitter, previously inedible roots by repeatedly washing them in running water. They discover that certain tree barks, when carefully stripped and chewed, provide emergency calories. They develop new methods of reading animal behavior, following species that have their own strategies for surviving environmental catastrophe. But the most profound changes aren't happening in their hands, they're happening in their heads. Modern neuroscience tells us that crisis accelerates brain development. Stress hormones in controlled doses actually enhance neural plasticity. The challenges our ancestors faced during this volcanic winter weren't just testing their existing abilities, they were literally rewiring their brains for greater problem-solving capacity. Each successful adaptation strengthened neural pathways associated with flexible thinking. Each creative solution built new connections between previously unrelated brain regions. Each moment of successful cooperation reinforced the social circuits that would eventually become the foundation of human civilization. They were evolving in real time, not just physically but cognitively. Years pass. The volcanic winter gradually lifts, revealing a transformed landscape. Many of the old landmarks are gone, buried under meters of ash. Rivers have changed course. Lakes have dried up or formed in entirely new locations. Species that couldn't adapt have vanished forever. But our ancestors not only survived, they emerged stronger, smarter, more adaptable than ever before. And something else has changed. Something subtle but revolutionary. Watch as one of the younger adults examines a rock that broke in an interesting way during their recent travels. Instead of discarding it, he picks it up, studies it, tests its edges against various materials. He's beginning to see not just what the rock is, but what it could become. This is the moment, the precise evolutionary instant, when tools stop being accidental discoveries and start becoming intentional innovations. He doesn't yet know how to systematically create such implements. That knowledge is still generations in the future. But he's beginning to understand cause and effect in ways his ancestors never did. He's learning to see patterns, to recognize potential, to imagine solutions before problems fully manifest. The archaeological record suggests this transition happened gradually, almost imperceptibly. There was no sudden eureka moment when the first tool was invented. Instead, there was a slow evolution of thought itself, a growing capacity to perceive the world not just as it is, but as it could be modified to serve their needs. This cognitive leap represents something unprecedented in the history of life on Earth. For the first time, a species was beginning to reshape their environment rather than simply adapt to it. But perhaps the most remarkable legacy of these toolless ancestors isn't technological, it's social. The survival strategies they developed created the template for everything that would follow. The knowledge sharing that kept them alive became the foundation of human education. The reciprocal cooperation that distributed risks became the basis of economic systems. The long-term thinking required for seasonal survival became the cognitive framework for planning, agriculture, and civilization itself. They didn't just survive. They created the behavioral blueprint for becoming human. Fast forward through time, and you can see their innovations echoing across millennia. The grandmother teaching her granddaughter which plants are safe to eat? That's the same knowledge transfer system our Australopithecus ancestors pioneered. The farmer planning crop rotations based on seasonal patterns? That's the same long-term environmental thinking they developed. The emergency food stored in your pantry? The water filtration system in your home? The cooperative networks that allow modern society to function? All of these represent direct evolutionary descendants of innovations first developed by beings with empty hands and growing minds 2.7 million years ago. Modern geneticists have identified something fascinating in our DNA, genetic adaptations that clearly originated during this period of human evolution. Our ability to extract maximum nutrition from plant-based diets. Our enhanced capacity for long-distance walking. Our sophisticated systems for processing and storing complex environmental knowledge. These aren't just cultural legacies. They're written into the very structure of our cells. Every modern human carries the genetic innovations that allowed our ancestors to survive their impossible world. But there's a deeper mystery hidden in their success. Recent analysis of fossil teeth from this period reveals something that shouldn't be possible. These predominantly plant-eating ancestors were somehow obtaining enough protein and essential amino acids to support increasingly large, energy-hungry brains. The nutritional mathematics still don't add up. Modern nutritionists, working with all the advantages of contemporary food science, struggle to design purely plant-based diets that could fuel the kind of brain development we see in the fossil record. Yet somehow they did it. For hundreds of thousands of years, they solved a dietary puzzle that we're still trying to understand. The answer may lie in their relationship with the landscape itself. Recent archaeological evidence suggests these early humans weren't just living in their environment, they were actively managing it. Strategic burning to encourage new plant growth. Selective harvesting that promoted the reproduction of preferred species. Even primitive forms of seed dispersal that expanded the range of nutritious plants. They weren't just foragers, they were the world's first ecosystem engineers. This revelation fundamentally changes how we understand early human intelligence. They weren't passive victims of their environment, waiting for evolution to provide them with better tools. They were active agents of change, systematically modifying their world to better serve their needs. Standing here at the end of our journey through deep time, a profound question emerges. If these remarkable beings could accomplish so much with so little, if they could feed growing brains, develop complex social systems, and begin reshaping their world using nothing but intelligence and cooperation, what does that say about the true nature of human potential? Their story suggests that our greatest innovations don't come from our tools, but from our ability to think beyond the limitations of our current circumstances. They remind us that cooperation isn't just nice. It's the fundamental survival strategy that allowed us to become human in the first place. The sun sets over the African Rift Valley, just as it has for billions of years. But the landscape below has been forever changed by the presence of beings who learned to see beyond what is, to imagine what could be. Our small family of Australopithecus has grown into a larger band, their knowledge spreading across generations, their innovations accumulating like sediment in the archaeological record. The children who learned to read plants from their elders are now teaching their own offspring, adding new discoveries to the growing library of survival wisdom. They don't know it, but they're creating the future. Every shared meal is a lesson in cooperation. Every successful foraging expedition builds the neural pathways that will eventually design cities. Every moment of creative problem-solving strengthens the cognitive foundations that will someday reach for the stars. They are us in our most essential form. Curious, adaptive, endlessly ingenious beings who refuse to accept the limitations their world tried to impose upon them. The greatest mystery isn't how they survived without tools. The mystery is how they managed to be so thoroughly, recognizably human while living lives we can barely imagine. They loved their children, shared their discoveries, mourned their losses, and faced each new challenge with the same mixture of fear and determination that drives us today. In their empty hands, we see the true origin of human creativity. In their growing minds, we recognize the birth of the imagination that would eventually transform the entire planet. As darkness falls over ancient Africa, our ancestors settle into their nightly routine. They'll take turns keeping watch, reading the sounds of the night for signs of danger or opportunity. They'll share the day's discoveries with the younger members of the group, ensuring that hard-won knowledge survives another generation. And tomorrow, when the sun rises again over the endless savanna, they'll face the same impossible challenge that has defined their existence for countless millennia: finding enough food to survive in a world that guards its secrets jealously. But now we know their secret. Now we understand how they achieved the impossible. They did it the same way we still do it today, the same way we've always done it, the same way we always will. Together, with empty hands, growing minds, and an unshakable belief that somehow, impossibly, tomorrow will be better than today. Their greatest legacy isn't written in stone or preserved in fossils. It's written in us, in our stubborn refusal to accept defeat, our endless capacity for innovation, and our deep understanding that no challenge is insurmountable when faced with intelligence, cooperation, and time. They were human long before they had the tools to prove it. And their story is still being written. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we continue exploring the incredible, terrifying, and inspiring story of how we became human. Because understanding where we came from isn't just about history, it's about understanding who we are today and who we might become tomorrow. What prehistoric mystery would you like us to explore next? Let us know in the comments, and remember, every story of human survival is ultimately your story too.